Here we are at Derby Dome, and all of these rocks in front of us are Jurassic. Right here is a limestone layer from the Gypsum Spring Formation. The Gypsum Spring Formation is characterized by this reddish mud rock interspersed by limestone layers, which are gray. You can see some in the distance there. The view up here on the Jurassic Gypsum Spring Formation gives me a chance to show the rocks that are further up in the section, younger rocks, the Jurassic Sundance Formation, which is this greenish looking gray slope with the junipers on them. And that has fossils from the Sundance Sea that basically form those rocks. And as I pan back across the Gypsum Spring Formation here, which is characterized by the limestone and the mud rock, and also gypsum layers, I can also see the older sandstone, which is the Nugget sandstone. This is right on the face of a portion of the Gypsum Spring Formation with the red mud rock and the gypsum. And the gypsum is what wallboard is made out of, calcium sulfate. You can see when you break it, you get a nice powdery white surface. So this is a view looking up a slope on the Gypsum Spring Formation, and it's dominated by this reddish mud rock that you can see, but it's interspersed with, well, up at the top, gypsum layer, and it has some of the limestone. It's it's eroded down from the top, but limestone coming from various limestone layers, usually they're at the top of these ridges. The idea with the Gypsum Spring Formation is that it was a sort of a tidal mud flat area adjacent to an ocean or saltwater body of some sort. And you get these salts, these gypsum salts, but you also have limestone layers and mud rock. And as I pan this way to the older Jurassic aged Nugget sandstone, you're looking at, well, it was a transition from land, obviously the sandstone forming on land, to some sort of back ocean or tidal flat situation with the Gypsum Spring Formation. So we're right on the border between these two rock formations here. So here we can see the Nugget sandstone forming these prominent cliffs, and it is an aeolian sandstone. Aeolian deposits means wind deposited, so it has sand dunes in it, which is pretty exciting. And in the background you can still see the Gypsum Spring Formation. Here we are in the reddish mud rock of the Gypsum Spring Formation. And as I pan to the right, we are getting here to a cliff of sorts, where one of the limestone layers here is in a drainage, and it's forming a V shape, just like the contours do on a topographic map. This is a great example of how contours V towards the uphill direction on a map. And you can also see some of the lower limestone layers doing the same thing. There's a lot of slag and materials falling off, so it's hard to see. Another thing you can see in this little drainage is little pieces of gypsum kind of sticking out. And who knows, this could even be a gypsum layer. It's always a little bit nondescript here. It's very powdery. It's easy to pulverize the gypsum with the harder limestone. Some of the gypsum pieces are really, really soft. Not these. Here we have what is most likely the uppermost of the 4 limestones of the Gypsum Spring Formation, and the little platy pieces of limestone, layers of limestone, are jutting out. And in the foreground right here, you can see a gypsum layer. So the gypsum is in here. It's just a little more nondescript than the limestone layers that jut out. And you can kind of project this limestone layer here across this little valley over to the hillside over there. Sometimes when you're in the Gypsum Spring Formation, it just looks like a bunch of dirt. Reddish, kind of tinged dirt, burgundy colored. And that's true, but it is mud rock. The actual rock layer that this material is derived from is mud rock. And here's a close-up of some of it. Now, it's not in place, but you can see how these burgundy colored pieces in my hand are actual little miniature pebble-like stones. And these basically have eroded from a mud rock layer. If I were to dig in here, we would find it, and it would just fall apart, kind of like you're seeing this do. So again, this is a little valley in the Gypsum Spring Formation, and as I kind of pan this way, number one, you can sort of see some of this gypsum here. It's covered by this weathered mud rock, which that's what characterizes this formation. It looks pretty much that orangish red color from far away, punctuated by various bright layers, such as limestone layers and some particularly bright gypsum layers. But here, right in here, you can actually see the mud rock layers in place. It's just weathering out. But these are little bitty, shaly little pieces. And here you can actually really see maybe some of the layering. And then here's a piece of gypsum there. It's a very interesting formation. Here we have a treat. We're in the Gypsum Spring Formation, and they're surrounded by this sort of orangish red material that weathers off of the formation, punctuated by pieces of limestone. But here's a rare gem. This is a treat. We get to see a piece of mud rock, or a layer of mud rock, that's actually this greenish color down here. And this is in place. It's a little bit difficult to get to because there's a gypsum layer on top of it, but this is mud rock, probably carbonaceous, probably would fizz if I put acid on it, but nonetheless, this is a neat area here, a neat layer to see. And that sort of bare patch between the trees, that is the contact or boundary between the Nugget Sandstone and the Gypsum Spring Formation. And it's pretty steep here in the Gypsum Spring Formation. Walk up to the Nugget Sandstone ledge up there. You can see on the ground here, this is material weathered off of the Gypsum Spring Formation. But as I walk over here to the contact between the Gypsum Spring Formation here on the left, Nugget Sandstone on the right, you can see that the Gypsum Spring Formation is actually higher in elevation than I'm standing. Of course, everything's traveling downhill, so no surprises. This is very likely right on the contact between the two formations. Gypsum Spring Formation on the left, Nugget Sandstone on the right. Here's a piece of gypsum. So now I've come down the section just a bit, and we're in the Jurassic aged Nugget Sandstone Formation. This is correlative with the Aztec Sandstone and the Navajo Sandstone in the southwestern part of the United States. And this is an aeolian deposit, a wind deposited sandstone. And you can see that by the basically the sand dunes, which we can get some pictures of a little later. But if you look up close here, I see this is just a slab of sandstone here. And if you look at this, it's very, very clean, clean sand. And if you looked at this through a hand lens, you would definitely see that these sand grains are abraded. That is, they're not clear kind of quartz. Look, they're quartz, but they're not clear, polished. They're abraded, and that's a result of each grain of sand blowing around and banging into the others and leaving little kind of pock marks. So that's the Nugget sandstone. Here we can see some crossbedded sandstones in the Jurassic Nugget sandstone, Jurassic aged. You can see the layers going all uniform here, and then in the level above you can see it's at a different angle. This is classic of wind deposited sand dunes. Sometimes in the Nugget sandstone you find these iron concretions. They come in a lot of different shapes. Some of them are more linear or cylindrical, linear, like a root perhaps was fossilized. Hard to say for sure. Some of them are more rounded. There's a rounded one with iron staining on the rock around it. And the main idea behind these is that these were some piece of organic matter was trapped in the sandstone as it was deposited, or the sand. And over time, as groundwater percolated through the formation, you would get iron oxides or rust